I think at the very beginning of the pandemic, people were almost even appreciating the time away and being able to decompress and spend some time with yourself. But now everyone is really craving that social interaction again, and it's desperately needed, especially for older adults and teenagers.
Isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting teenagers and adults similarly. And two K-State research and extension specialists think that older adults and teens could be an ideal match for support as the pandemic continues. On today's Sound Living, a need for connectedness. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension Youth Development Specialist Elaine Johannes and Adult Development and Aging Specialist Erin Yelland say the health risks involved for both age groups can be addressed, and that the most sensible response is to connect the two groups. Elaine and Erin, one of the things we know from the pandemic is the fact that isolation is not good for anyone, but it especially seems to be hitting older adults and teenagers the hardest.
Yeah, so we know that older adults in particular are one of the groups that are at most risk for the negative effects of COVID-19. And so they've really been encouraged from the very beginning to be isolating. And of course, this has been going on for so many months now that this is really beginning to take a toll on older adults, especially in regard to their longer-term health outcomes. There's been a lot of research that's come out recently saying that the rates of depression and anxiety and even the risk of dementia is increasing among older adults because of this social isolation.
And Erin, what's interesting is that kind of outcome is something that teenagers are at risk for too. Young people, by the nature of their development, are to be engaging with their peers, or to be taking appropriate risk and learning from it and having an opportunity to test their relational skills, but then they're isolated too. And if they're able to go to school, they can't really participate the way that they had been. And then for those that are taking education online at home, that's an isolated task too. And for younger people, the whole goal of the teen years is really to develop who they are. And the only way we could do that is to test our identity, test our friendships, test our physical abilities, either as an athlete, an artist, a caring volunteer. And it's really hard to test your identities on an iPad.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we can do online, but at the same time, there are certain things that we cannot do. But what we're kind of looking at is the fact that these two groups, the older adults and the teenagers, may be able to help one another with this isolation.
Yes, I think at the very beginning of the pandemic, people were almost even appreciating the time away and being able to decompress and spend some time with yourself. But now everyone is really craving that social interaction again, and it's desperately needed, especially for older adults and teenagers. And some different ways that we can connect these groups is through schoolwork. Perhaps there's a grandparent who is a retired nurse or doctor who could help them with biology or some of these more science-related topics. Perhaps a grandparent is particularly good at math and they can connect on that topic. They can also connect in different ways, talking about social things that they're interested in or even hobbies, and being able to share those as well. And I know that many older adults still need to be taking precautions to avoid being exposed to COVID-19. So these things could take place both online, but hopefully we can start getting back to having small social interactions in person as well.
There's an example of that. I didn't know, Erin, if you knew this, but Laura Horton, one of our agents out in the Syracuse area, the Hamilton County area, has discovered that there's a lot of the youth who were members of orchestras and bands that now they can't practice during school and they don't have a group to do it with. And so she is working with people in the community who have instruments, who have been able to play over the years, and trying to do this like virtual matching and having them help that younger individual who now really grieves the fact that they don't have an orchestra to be together with. And I think out in a rural area, Laura is able to use Extension as a connecting place to do those. And over the last couple of years, I do think that cooperative extension across this whole state has really tried to emphasize how volunteers of all different ages and types can work collectively for the common good. And so when I think about youth volunteers, especially those in, maybe 9th grade to 12th, there are some things that really do get them excited. Some of the research around what's called Generation Z, the Zers, those are the people that are in high school and a little older, not very much older, but the Gen Zers have characteristics of being loyal, thoughtful, open-minded, very responsible. So as volunteers, I think we could tap into that energy. But then on the other hand, some of the research have said that the things that don't get a young person excited to volunteer are things like money. They really aren't motivated by that. Competition, that's not among the top ways to motivate Gen Zers to be involved. Acceptance by others. And I think what's really amazing is that they really don't want to be publicly recognized.
And older adults just like that connection, right? Erin, they just like to share their knowledge. They like to be involved. They like to feel like they are still alive and still contributing.
Absolutely. And this is particularly true for Kansans. One little known fact is that Kansas has the highest rate of volunteerism in the country, and many of the individuals that make up this volunteer pool are older adults. So there's a unique history and willingness of Kansans to become active and volunteer, share their skills, share their resources, and share their passions.
And a lot of the restrictions only apply to nursing homes and hospitals. If it's more of a one-on-one relationship, you can social distance and still interact, if I understand how the process is supposed to work.
Absolutely. And there's numerous things that you can do, such as grabbing a cup of coffee and sitting outside and just sharing and talking. There's so many different things that we can really start to do now that we understand the safety precautions and things that we can be doing to ensure that we're being as safe as possible. So think about what you are most interested in, how you think you could contribute. Think about those connections and relationships that you already have and really take advantage of those to really spark up that social interaction again.
This is something that doesn't have to be a half of an afternoon. It doesn't have to be an all-day event. Sometimes it's just checking in on a neighbor or, like Elaine said, checking in on someone's homework for a little bit.
In my past, a long time ago, I remember being a director of a community agency that had a program that was called Ring-A-Day. And Ring-A-Day was the old-style person, a younger person usually would call an older adult when they got home from school, ring a day, and that younger person who was trained would converse and just kind of check on the welfare of the older adult. And in turn, that older adult knew that that younger person got home safe and sound, and then probably encouraged them to get to their schoolwork or to go out and get a little extra, physical activity. So we could encourage communities, offices, agencies, faith groups to do something in a similar way to match maybe the older adult who has this particular skill or interest with a younger person who is bored or who wants to be connected. And again, it's getting back to what a Gen Zer is excited by, the purpose, meaning, giving back to someone that they understand has history and stories that can talk about how they then were able to get through some tough times, be it an illness or be it a loss of a job or just having maybe been alone when they were young too.
I don't know if the signs would be similar or dissimilar between what you might see in terms of a teenager who was starting to feel the effects of being isolated and an older adult. Are they somewhat similar? Would we maybe see the same kind of maybe withdrawnness from them?
Many of the signs of social isolation and the effects that older adults can have from that are things like depression and anxiety. And a lot of that we're going to see in our younger adults and middle-aged adults as well. So that's something that we'll see across the lifespan. But some unique issues that we see among middle-aged and older adults in particular as a result of social isolation are reduced physical activity. So we're seeing a lot more of those chronic diseases popping up now already, such as high blood pressure and cholesterol rates are increasing and all of these things. So we're seeing those health effects are starting to become a concern. And among older adults as well, social isolation is a huge risk factor for the development of dementia. So we certainly have many unique things that are coming out for older adults and have been in place, and we've known about them for many years. But we're starting to see also and recognize that those similarities do exist for older adults and our younger adults as well.
And Erin, jumping off from that, then on the other side of the lifespan, the adolescent development also has to do with brain development. And as we know, the brain is not fully developed, especially in the executive functions of setting goals, following through, being able to problem solve. And those are things that are learned through experience and through time. So I would say when the research continues to come out on what Corona is doing for younger people, it might be limiting or slowing down their ability to problem solve, to set goals, because they need to have experience doing that. And they need to be able to have trial and error and success. And so an older adult, by just the fact that they've lived life, has had those trial, errors, and successes. And they know how to manage some of their stress. Younger people haven't had that experience, and so their depression and their anxieties may be really related to brain development and not ever been through some of these tough times before.
One of the things I think we're really pointing out here is the fact that there needs to be engagement, and we also need to make sure that people are not falling into the gaps. And this may be a case where we really need to take a look around our community, especially at those two various age groups, just to see how they're doing.
Well, and Jeff, I do think Erin and I are aware that there's the cheese between the buns, meaning the parent. The parent who's having to take care of homeschooling and keeping the family going and their own jobs, but then also that parent who's taking care of their older parent and taking care of their health care and being in contact during these really tough times. And honestly, I think that cheese between the buns are really what I'm also worried about, and maybe Erin is too.
Yeah, those middle adults that are really in the middle of what we call that sandwich generation are struggling, and it's incredibly difficult. I know personally I have 2 young kiddos at home that I'm trying to get through school. I'm working full time, and my dad has dementia and several health issues. So I can personally speak to the intense pressure that's being put on many individuals across the world, even at this time. And it can be very challenging. So thinking about our pre-existing networks, thinking about people you've connected to in the past, and how we can check in on those individuals, start to maybe make those social connections happen again as safely as possible in person, would be absolutely wonderful for many people, and all of those certainly involved.
You know, I think we all know this Corona issue and all of the other health effects and the economic toll is not going to be over real soon. And so I think, Erin, you and I would recommend that communities start to be creative and create these like pods of support where they can, and not wait for a large-scale initiative to occur.
That's K-State Research and Extension Youth Development Specialist Elaine Johannes and Adult Development and Aging Specialist Erin Yelland. More information on issues related to youth and aging are available online at ksre.ksu.edu. You can also contact the local county or district extension office. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.